Hello, and thank you for joining me for today's episode of The Thing About Birth. Each episode I will dive into a different topic relating to birth, pregnancy, hypnobirthing and parenting. Keep an eye out for special Q&A episodes, guest episodes and relaxation episodes. Thank you to those who have liked, shared, subscribed, watched and listened so far. It really means the world to me. Enjoy! Hi everybody, thanks so much for joining me today. I've just realised that in my glasses I can just see a reflection of myself and myself and myself just going backwards and forwards there, but it's just a bit entertaining more than anything else. Funny story about today's episode is that I have already recorded it. While I was recording it, I felt like I was not producing my best content. Now, I'll give myself a little bit of credit. I am over 30 weeks pregnant. I am tired. I have a lot going on. Both at home and with the pregnancy. I'll update that in the next pregnancy update that I do. I won't get caught up in that today. Everything is fine, but it's just a lot that's going on. So I feel like, if I'm not going to produce my best content, it's probably going to be now. I am starting to wind down the weeks a little bit, and I was recording it and I was thinking this isn't going to be great. It's very stop-start. I don't really feel like I'm covering the subject that I want to cover very concisely. But I thought, no, I'll just power through, and then I uploaded it, went to edit it, and as I was watching the playback and listening to it, I just thought, no, I can't put this out there. I kept going, and I didn't get halfway through before I thought, this just needs to go and I need to do it again. Moving on, if you're still here, to the episode. You might have seen on my socials and my blog this month I've been talking about preparing your birth space with a bit more of a focus on preparing your birth space in a hospital over the other locations that you could possibly choose. So today's episode is largely about preparing that hospital birth space, but I am going to talk a little bit about how you can pick where is best for you to give birth and a few things like that. Cover, the other areas. There are a few reasons why I'm choosing to focus more on hospital births over some of the other options. I know that it is quite common for particularly for hypnobirthing instructors to talk about home births, and that is absolutely wonderful. Home births are an excellent option. The idea behind focusing on the hospital side of birth is that, first of all, I live in an area where the home birth service is not currently active. It's suspended, and so getting a home birth is a little bit hard. I have birthed twice in a hospital, and I'm actually planning a third hospital birth. So my own experiences, while of course advice that I give will always be unbiased, I can use myself as an example of certain things, and I can also just talk about what I am doing for that preparation a little bit. And lastly, because we live in a climate where hospital births are so much more common than home births at the moment, and people are often pushed into interventions that will require them being in the hospital, so sometimes they can feel a little bit unprepared for going into that environment. And I would just like to be able to prepare people for as many different options as possible. And I realised that I haven't had a home birth client at all. They've all chosen to birth in the hospital because that option wasn't really available to them. And I feel like if I talked too much about preparing a birth space at home and not in the hospital, I'm not doing the best thing that I can to prepare people for that. Just a reminder that what I'm talking about is not me saying that home birth or hospital birth or whatever is the right choice for you. And anybody that ever came to me to say, I'm considering this or I'm considering that, I would always support their right to choose. their right to make informed choices and guide them on making informed choices rather than saying, well, actually, you should birth here or you should birth there. That's a big part of my job, is being unbiased. It's providing information, it's helping with decision making in the sense that I'm providing you with the tools to make decisions. So it's not my choice where you give birth. This is just what I feel I need to focus on for this episode. But there are tons of great options out there. Well, not tons, that's maybe a bit extreme. There are great options out there, and it is largely just about you being prepared. So just quickly, I'm just going to talk about the different options for your birth location, because before you can even plan what your birth environment should look like and what your birth space should look like, you need to pick where you are most likely going to give birth. Now, this is a reminder that I will tell people over and over again that birth is unpredictable, things change, and another part of what I do is helping you learn how to cope with those changes. So that's not me saying that you should just go with the flow. That's me saying be prepared for various different eventualities and know that it's okay if things change. It's okay that things change as long as those changes are your choices. So whatever you were being told or advised, you're not just going with what you were being told or advised. You are researching, you are being informed, you are making those decisions, and ideally you want to make those decisions well before you are even in labour. You want to be making them weeks and weeks before your due time, because they're adaptable, they're changeable, but you don't want to get to that point where you're days away from delivery and suddenly you're being faced with all of these different options and you don't know what to do, so you just go with it, because that's when you lose control. That's when you are no longer in control of the situation. So just as a reminder that I'm not here to tell you what to do and where to give birth. It's kind of a long way to say it, but it's really important. I really hope this reflection in my glasses is not as distracting to all of you as it is to me, because I don't want to keep drawing attention to it, but it just feels like it's just right there. There's nothing I can do about it right now. It's the circumstances that I'm under for recording. But again, I do apologise about that. Anyway, so your different options for where you can give birth. Now, it may vary on what's available from place to place, and of course I'm filming in the northeast of England, so different countries will also have different options, but generally speaking, you're looking at a home birth, a hospital birth, a midwife-led unit or birth centre, and then there's free birthing, which of course isn't a location, it's a choice to birth without medical staff present, so a midwife, obstetrician, anything like that. You're birthing essentially you and possibly your birth partner or a birth partner or two. But the reason why I mention it is because a free birth gives you the freedom to pick wherever you give birth. I mean, of course, you're probably not going to go and give birth in the middle of, I don't know, a coffee shop. But say, for example, if you wanted to give birth in the middle of, a wooded area or on the beach, which I've seen videos of people doing it in the sea. I think a lot of free births probably do happen at home. They're different to giving birth before your medical team, whether it's a midwife or paramedics or whoever, arrive. So you go into labour, it all happens very quickly before you can either get to a medical facility or they can get to you. And I've known people that this has happened to as well. That's not a free birth, because a free birth is choosing to birth without that level of assistance. So that just gives you the option to birth wherever you want, I imagine, within some reason. So I'm not going to go through the risks and benefits of the different options, because like I said, I'm primarily focusing on hospital births. I am just going to talk about the things that you might want to consider when you are picking these through these different options. So first of all, you have to look at what's available to you, because if you are picking a location that is very, very far away You might not actually come into their level of, or their area of care because of your location. But also you have to consider about whether or not you can get there. Now this might not be a concern for some people. If you have to travel quite far though, and you are concerned about not getting there in time, then it's not a sensible option. For each option that you've got, you need to look at the risks and benefits, because there will be risks and benefits to both. There will be risks and benefits to all of the options. There is a lot of evidence out there to support actually home birth as being the safer option for the majority of people. So there is a great study called the Birthplace Study, and I would really recommend reading that because it gives you quantifiable evidence based on based on which child you are birthing, so whether it's first, second or subsequent children, with home births, hospital births and birth centres or midwife-led units as the different options. So that's a really great study. So when you're looking at risks and benefits, read that study. Another great thing to do is consider your own risks. So a lot of us get labelled as high risk, but quite often that high risk doesn't mean that you or your baby will require medical attention during the birth or after the birth. So by this, I'm primarily talking about genuine health risks. It's a funny one because there are so many different variables here, so I'm not going to go through lots of examples. I'm going to use myself as an example here. One of the reasons why we are choosing a hospital birth is because I'm at risk of having a second postpartum hemorrhage. I had one after I'd had my daughter. I have been told that the risks are very, very small for this to happen again. So it was something like my risk increases from 7% if I'd never had one before to 15% because I've had one before. So a larger amount of people will not have that secondary hemorrhage. But what I can tell you is that the hemorrhage that I experienced happened very, very quickly after birth, less than 2 hours post-birth. I didn't fall into any of the risk categories for having a hemorrhage. They were very aware at the time, due to giving me an examination on my tummy, that something might happen. So they were prepared for it happening, which meant that they could act very, very quickly. And they did act incredibly quickly. And I felt awful while it was happening. And I felt awful after it had happened. I had to go to theatre for it. And I had to be given a lot of medication for it. And the thought of that happening at home and me then having to transfer to the hospital and feeling that horrific just doesn't make me feel comfortable. You know, it gives me anxiety, and that is counterproductive when you were going to give birth. Anyway, bit of a tangent there. I just wanted to present you with an example of a risk where there could be an actual medical need and not just a risk that is very low or unlikely to happen or doesn't actually require medical attention. So that's one thing that you might want to consider. Another thing to consider then off the back of that is, where is your nearest hospital? Are you going to have to travel far? In which case perhaps planning a home birth might be better. Or if you're planning a home birth, how easy will it be to transfer to the hospital in the very unlikely instance that you need to? What are the hospital standards and ratings like? Now, please do not go onto your local social media page and ask what other people's experiences are like giving birth there. Because what will happen is, say you get, 15 people that reply. You might have 5 people that say, I had an amazing experience there and can really rate them. Then you'll get 5 people that will say, I had a horrific experience, and they'll start telling you these really nasty horror stories, which are very valid because it's what happened to them. Then you might get, say, 3 people that say, oh, well, actually, I recommend this hospital that isn't in your area or isn't accessible to you, or just gives you another option to have to then think, well, now I need to find out what they're like. And then you might get two people that say, check your hospital ratings. And that's what you want to do. You want to go online, you want to check reviews of the hospital online, the ratings and standards. If you go to my blog, I've actually linked to a website where you can do this quite easily. And just have a look and see. And you can also take tours of the hospital. They even offer virtual tours, which is much easier. And it's just meaning that you're getting an idea of what it's like. So have a look at those and see if those options then sit comfortably with you. Have a look at the facilities that are available. Have they got a birth pool? Are they able to provide you with other birthing equipment like birth stools, birth balls, mats? Have the bathrooms got showers and baths in them? You know, what are the visitor policies like? How long can your birth partner be with you? Have a look at their birth statistics and see, you know, what the rates of induction, caesarean, vaginal birth, assisted birth, etc. are, and see if those statistics, you know, fall in line with how you feel about giving birth. The things that you might want to consider, you know, is also if you are looking at a birth centre or midwife-led units, that some of them are attached to hospitals and some of them aren't. So if you are concerned about whether or not you will need the hospital, which of those options works best for you? Again, these things that you want to consider may not be important to everybody, but they are things they are worth mentioning for those of us that they may be important to, because the things that aren't important, you know, if I'm giving you a list of things that you might want to consider and you think, right, okay, well, that's not important, that's not important, that's not important, oh, but that one is important, great, look at that as an option. Remember that it's all about just preparation, preparation, preparation. And I will say this to everybody that I come into contact with relation to giving birth and hypnobirthing, etc. Good birth preparation cannot guarantee a certain outcome, okay? But it puts the odds in your favour of having a better outcome, because you are in control when you've done good birth preparation. You know the choices that you want, you know what you are willing to accept and not willing to accept, and the circumstances under which you are willing to accept these things. You are less likely to be panicking because you've already made the decisions. Okay, you are learning how to cope with change as it happens, which leaves you in control. I know some people say, well, I won't be in control if things go wrong or things change, but it's about accepting that things changing is fine, okay? As long as you are the one that is in control of that change. One final thing that you might want to consider is where you feel safest. So for many, many people, being at home will be that safest option. That's not going to be the case for everybody, okay? So consider if you feel safe in your environment. Now, on the other side, there are people, many people, who will not feel safe in the hospital, okay? You need to consider, is this a safe environment for me and my baby to be giving birth in? Because your oxytocin hormone needs that safety to work. It needs to feel safe. You need to reduce the release of anxiety, the release of adrenaline. You need to feel safe, loved, happy, you know, private. And so you need to consider, is this the place that I feel safest? There is no right or wrong answer here, okay? There is only what serves you. So please, please keep that in mind. Okay, so once you've picked your birthplace, so we are going to assume in this scenario that somebody is wanting to prepare their birth space in a hospital. Okay, so you've decided you were going to birth in the hospital. Now, first of all, what I would say, just as a side note, if you were birthing outside of the hospital and you were building this gorgeous birth-based oxytocin producing space, as part of your plan, you should have a hospital transfer bag. Now, for some people, they might be absolutely adamant that they are not going to transfer to the hospital. But remember, you are trying to prepare for different eventualities. And if you are not prepared for a hospital transfer and you do end up requiring one, then you're adding a lot of stress and pressure to yourself. Okay? So you should have a go bag ready, a hospital go bag. And when you are building your gorgeous oxytocin boosting birth environment for inside your own home or the midwife-led unit or your free birth, have a little bag that contains some of the items, as many of the items that you are using at home. Okay, so some of the things that you might want replicas of could be like a little lavender bag. I make these for my clients, by the way. So a lavender bag or a scent bag. If you've got a room spray, having a duplicate of that. If you're using little twinkly lights, whether they're fairy lights or what do you call them, little tea lights or candles, having an option that is already packed, having something to use in the car or ambulance to help distract you from the journey, so earbuds, an eye mask, affirmations or music, something comforting like a blanket or your favorite hoodie or something like that. All of these little things, affirmations, music, whatever you're using, ready to go with you so that you are not having to then pack them up. And then when you get to the hospital, it's up to your birth partner to then set them up for you. Now, this, like I say, it's unlikely to happen, but it's just, again, it's about being prepared and taking those stresses away from you. So, some things that you should be aware of when you were choosing to birth in a hospital is that you are more likely to be put under pressure to have interventions. You are more likely to have things go, you are more likely to have the higher risk outcomes happen because of certain interventions and pressure to be monitored. And the environment can play havoc with your birth hormones. It can produce anxiety. It can stall oxytocin, which then stalls your labour. There are lots of different things like that to consider. Consider the fact that you might not always be able to get privacy. You may have to push a little bit harder for, setting up that birth environment the way you want it. There are lots of things like that to consider because you are no longer in the privacy of your own home. Also, there can be waiting about sometimes. So if you are, for example, accepting an induction, it's not necessarily a case, although it has always been my experience that things have just gone, I've gone in and the induction process has been started and I've not had to wait around. But if you are accepting an induction or something like that, you may have to wait. Sometimes, not just necessarily a few hours, but a few days, potentially, because they're waiting for the available staff, the available beds, etc. Sometimes, you were being clock watched because then they're saying, we're going to check you at this time. You might find that you are told what to do a bit more than you would at home. So the environment is going to be a challenge, and that is where a lot of your preparation comes in. So knowing that you can advocate for yourself, knowing that you don't have to just do as you're told, knowing that you still have options and choices, knowing that hospital policy is not law, so you do not have to accept anything based on the fact that you are told that it's hospital policy and that's the way they do things. All sorts, which is going to be covered in any good hypnobirthing course, including my own. But there are ways around this that you can influence these things as well. So that's where we're going to be talking about building your birth environment. So we're really getting into the purpose of the episode now. I realise it's taken a little while to get here, but the stuff that I've talked about so far has been important in as far as the decision-making process goes. So you are, this is the example I'm going to use, okay? You're at home, you've been labouring at home, and you're at the point where you need to transfer to the hospital. So you have your hospital bag, which should be a suitcase, with yours and baby's stuff in. Your husband or birth partner has a bag of their own stuff that they might need. You've got your transfer birth space stuff set up, because even if you were labouring at home with the intention to transfer to the hospital, you should still be using all of these oxytocin boosting things. And you've got your little car distractions all ready to go. So off you go to the hospital. Now, once you get there and you are allocated your space, which in this scenario, we're going to get there and, you know, you are ready to go to the delivery suite. You are not waiting on a ward, you're not being sent home. But remember, again, that if you were being sent home for whatever reason, you know, you've accepted an examination and they've said, oh, you're actually only 2 centimetres dilated, so go home, get as far as you can at home. Or they've put you on in a ward because of, you know, they haven't got a delivery suite available yet and you've still got a little bit to go until you're ready to deliver. You know, remember that you can still make use of all of these things. But for this scenario, you know, you're going straight into the delivery suite. I find myself getting very sidetracked here, but it's because I just want to be very clear on what we're talking about. So you've gotten to the hospital and you're going into the delivery suite. Again, all of these items can be used in any place that you were in, but for this purpose, that's what we're talking about. So how are you going to make that room your ideal birth space? Okay, so here are some things that you may want to consider doing. Removing any clocks and advising that you don't want to hear any time speak. So you don't want to be told, right, we'll check you again in 4 hours or whatever. Have your birth partner timing your contractions if you want your contractions timed, but don't you involve yourself in it, because oxytocin does not like to be watched, it doesn't like to be on a timer, and it'll just stress you out. Oxytocin, when it's flowing well, distorts time, so it's a bit like, you know, time flies when you're having fun. It's because you're releasing oxytocin. Setting the room up so that this lighting is darker and softer, so switching off the overheads. There might be a nice little lamp in the room, but putting on your little tea lights or fairy lights or whatever option you've gone for will also help promote that, you know, good hormone release and make you feel calmer and safer. Bring a little speaker, or, you know, use your phone, use your earbuds, whichever option works. You might want a combination of them, but having, you know, your birth playlist on the go straight away, or your affirmations, whichever one you want. Speaking of affirmations, having them available either printed, so I have them printed on these little cards, and they are actually provided by the lady that does my hypnobirthing training, teacher training. But I have a recording of them from my hypnobirthing instructor as well, because I did book with an instructor. So having those available both like this for you to read, or your birth partner to read out to you, but also having them on a recording as well, so you can switch if you want to stop listening to the music for a bit, if you need that kind of grounding that you get from them, can be really helpful. Having photos that produce, I'm going to say this word so many times, but that produce oxytocin, because again, really important. And I talk a lot about what these individual things could be on the blog, so I do recommend giving it a read. But having photos, whether it's of other children that you have from your wedding, your honeymoon, your favourite holiday, whatever, or, you know, something that depicts your happy place maybe, because you want to be able to really get that in your, you know, you want to be able to visualise your happy place as well. Having your scent anchors ready, so your lavender bag or whatever, your room spray, and getting that on the go. So some people take diffusers so that that smell is kind of continuously being put into the air. Have a think about the sort of, you know, who you want in the room. So you might want to stipulate that you only want your midwife in the room, you don't want anybody else to come in. Do you want them to knock before they enter? You might be quite happy to have more people in the room, but making sure that you're happy with those choices and that you are aware of who is in the room. Do you want them to talk softly and quietly and only to your birth partner unless absolutely necessary? Making the space, as cozy as you need it to be. So, bringing your own pillow, you could bring your own blanket if you wanted to. What is going to make you feel calm, safe, and happy? So those are just a handful of things that you might want to consider, but remember that you can set up that space however you want it and have good conversations with your birth partner in advance so that they know what they need to set up and how they need to set it up. You do not want to be in the situation where they are asking you questions about what you need or don't need. Make sure it's very, very clear the reasons that you want it and why you want it. And remember that these things can be used whether you're in the birth pool suite or without a birth pool. You might want to have something set up in the bathroom, because if you do want a little bit of extra privacy, that's the place to go, the bathroom. And if you are having a planned cesarean, you can still set up a lovely oxytocin producing environment, because remember that you can still use these things when you're having a cesarean. You can use them even if you're having an emergency cesarean, but understandably, depending on the emergency, you might not be able to get everything set up exactly as you wanted to. Consider that when you're making your birth plans and things. But there's a lot that you can still do to promote that, and it's really important that you're promoting oxytocin in all eventualities, because it helps with bonding, recovery, breastfeeding, and just, wouldn't you rather feel loved up and happy than stressed and anxious? So you can use these things or a combination of these things in all circumstances. If you're being induced, they're still useful, okay? In fact, really, really important if you're being induced to having any forms of interventions. Okay, please do go read the blog, because I go into a little bit more detail on there. A lot of the information that I'm giving is the same, there's just more examples to look at. I have talked quite a bit for this episode, but it's just so important. It's so important, and I can't stress it enough. The birth preparation, the oxytocin promotion, because as well, when you've got oxytocin promoting well, you get good endorphins as well. So anyway, let's not get sidetracked anymore. It is so important to be prepared, and just you want to do everything you can to have as lovely an experience as possible. So that doesn't happen by accident unless you are incredibly lucky. Okay, if you've got any questions, as always, let me know, and I will see you in a couple of weeks for my next pregnancy update. So take care in the meantime, and thank you for joining me. Bye. Thank you so much for listening today. Please, if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Ashley Nicole Hypnobirthing, and sign up for my monthly mailing list, The Thing About Birth, where you'll also get a free birth plan template and writing guide. See you next time.